I've always prided myself on being observant. It's a trait that served me well in my career as a structural engineer, spotting the tiniest cracks in a foundation before they split wide open. My wife, Emily, used to tease me about it, saying I'd notice if a single strand of her auburn hair was out of place. She wasn't wrong. For 15 years, I'd memorized every curve of her laugh, every flicker in her hazel eyes. Our marriage wasn't perfect, no one's is, but it was solid, or so I thought. We'd built a life together in our quiet suburban home, complete with a garden she tended obsessively and a kitchen where I'd cook her favorite meals on Sundays. Routine, yes, but comforting. That morning, though, something felt off. It was subtle, like the faint tremor before an earthquake. Emily was in the kitchen, humming as she sliced apples for a pie. I stood by the counter, sipping coffee, watching her hands move with that graceful precision I'd always admired. But her phone buzzed on the table, and she flinched, just a little, a twitch of her shoulder. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she kept cutting, the knife's rhythm unbroken. "Who's that?" I asked casually, nodding toward the device. She smiled, too quick, too bright. "Oh, probably just Sarah. You know how she loves her morning gossip. Sarah, her best friend since college." Plausible. I let it go. The day unfolded normally after that. I headed to the office, reviewed blueprints for a new bridge project, and came home to the smell of baked apples and cinnamon. Emily greeted me with a kiss, her lips warm and familiar. We ate dinner, talked about her garden club and my latest deadline, then settled on the couch with a movie. But that flinch stuck with me. It wasn't the first time I'd seen it. Over the past few weeks, her phone had become a third presence in our marriage, buzzing at odd hours, drawing her attention when she thought I wasn't looking. I didn't push. Not yet. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overanalyzing shadows. But cracks don't form without pressure, and I was starting to feel it beneath my feet. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her breathing was steady, peaceful, but mine felt tight, like I was bracing for something I couldn't name. I reached for my own phone, scrolling through mundane emails, trying to quiet my mind. Then I saw it. An alert from our shared cloud account. A new photo had uploaded from her device. Curiosity tugged at me. I opened the app, expecting a picture of her roses or the pie. Instead, it was a selfie. Emily, smiling, her hair tousled, sitting on a couch I didn't recognize. Behind her, a man's arm rested casually on the cushion, his hand brushing her shoulder. My stomach dropped. I zoomed in. The sleeve was rolled up, revealing a tattoo. A snake coiled around a dagger. I didn't know anyone with that tattoo, but Emily clearly did. The next morning, I didn't confront her. Couldn't. My mind was a storm of questions, but I needed proof. Something concrete beyond a single photo that could be explained away. Emily was already up when I stumbled into the kitchen. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her hands kneading dough for bread. She looked radiant, oblivious to the weight pressing on my chest. "Morning, love," she said, glancing over with that smile I'd once lived for. I mumbled a response, pouring coffee to steady my shaking hands. The photo burned in my mind. The stranger's arm, the tattoo, the couch that wasn't ours. I went through the motions at work, but my focus was shot. Blueprints blurred into meaningless lines. I kept replaying the last few months, searching for signs I'd missed. There'd been late nights at her garden club, weekend trips to visit Sarah, moments when she'd step outside to take calls. I chalked it up to her needing space. Every couple has ebbs and flows, right? But now those excuses felt flimsy, like paper walls crumbling under scrutiny. By noon, I couldn't stand it. I left the office early, claiming a headache, and drove home. Emily wouldn't be there. She had a meeting with her club. Perfect. Our house was silent when I stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of her lavender candles. I went straight to her laptop on the dining table. We'd never had secrets. Our passwords were shared, a relic of early trust. I logged in, my pulse pounding in my ears. Her email was clean, too clean, like it had been scrubbed. But then I checked her cloud backups. Hundreds of photos, most innocuous. Flowers, dinners, us. Then I found a folder labeled Miscellaneous. Inside, dozens of images, selfies of her with him. The same tattooed arm, the same man. Dark hair, sharp jaw, a smirk that made my fists clench. They were at restaurants, parks, a hotel room with unmade sheets in the background. My wife, my Emily, beaming beside him. I sat there, staring, until the screen blurred with my own tears. 15 years, and she'd carved out this secret life. I didn't know his name yet, but I'd find out. I copied the folder to a USB drive, wiped my tracks, and closed the laptop. When Emily came home that evening, I played my part, kissed her cheek, asked about her day. She chattered about hydrangeas and soil pH, oblivious to the rage simmering beneath my skin. That night, I didn't sleep. I planned. Revenge wasn't a word I'd ever associated with myself, but it felt right now, like a tool I'd been waiting to wield. I'd start with him, whoever he was. Finding him wasn't hard. Emily's carelessness was my advantage. One of the photos had a geotag, a cafe downtown, a place she'd never mentioned to me. I drove there the next day, a Saturday, under the guise of running errands. The cafe was quaint, all exposed brick and overpriced lattes. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window, scanning every face. An hour passed, then two. I was about to leave when he walked in. The tattoo gave him away. Sleeve rolled up, snake and dagger stark against his tan skin. He was taller than I'd imagined, broad-shouldered, with an easy confidence that made my blood boil. He ordered, flirted with the barista, and sat 3 tables away, scrolling his phone. I watched him, memorizing every detail. The way he tapped his foot, the silver ring on his left hand, the laugh lines around his eyes. He looked like someone who took what he wanted without apology. My wife included. I didn't approach him, not yet. I needed more. I snapped a discreet photo with my phone and left, my coffee untouched. Back in my car, I uploaded the image to a reverse search tool I'd found online. Within minutes, I had a name, Marcus Reed. A quick X search filled in the gaps. He was a personal trainer, 38, divorced, with a smug bio about living life unapologetically. His posts were full of gym selfies and motivational drivel. I hated him instantly. That night, Emily noticed my silence. "You okay, hon?" she asked, brushing my arm as we washed dishes. I forced a smile. "Just tired. Work's been rough." She nodded, accepting it, and went back to scrubbing plates. I wondered how long she'd been lying to me. How many nights she'd come home from him and kissed me with that same mouth. The thought made my stomach churn. I dug deeper after she went to bed, hacking into her deleted messages through an old backup. There they were, hundreds of texts between her and Marcus. Flirty at first, then intimate, then downright shameless. They'd been meeting for 8 months. 8 months of her laughing at his jokes, touching his arm, slipping away to motels while I sat home planning our anniversary. I didn't cry this time. I was past that. Instead, I felt a cold clarity settle in. Marcus wasn't some faceless phantom anymore. He was real, tangible, a target. And Emily? She'd made her choice. I wouldn't confront her yet. I'd let her think she was safe. Let them both dig their graves deeper. Revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about precision. I'd dismantle their little world piece by piece, and they'd never see it coming. For the next week, I wore my husband mask like armor. I smiled at Emily over breakfast, complimented her cooking, even helped her prune the roses she loved so much. She seemed lighter, happier, as if my ignorance was her freedom. Every touch, every word from her felt like a blade twisting deeper, but I kept my composure. I had to. The plan forming in my head required patience. Years of engineering had taught me that rushed work collapses. This wouldn't. I tracked Marcus's routine instead. His ex-posts were a goldmine: gym at 6 a.m., coffee at the cafe by 9, client sessions until late afternoon. He lived in a loft downtown, a sleek place he'd bragged about online with photos of leather couches and city views. I drove by one evening, parking across the street, watching the lights flick on in his windows. Emily wasn't there. I'd made sure she was home, busy with a book club call. But I imagined her there, sprawled on that couch, laughing with him. The image fueled me. I started small, testing the waters. Using a burner phone, I sent Marcus a text. Saw you at the cafe. Nice tattoo. He replied within minutes. Thanks, man. You a client. I didn't respond. Let him stew. The next day, I left a note under his windshield wiper and signed, just a sketch of his tattoo. Childish, maybe, but I wanted him uneasy. He posted about it on X later, joking about a secret admirer. Good. Let him think it's a game. Meanwhile, I dug into his life. A friend in IT owed me a favor. He pulled Marcus's financials. Steady income, but a gambling habit, online poker mostly. He was in debt. Not crippling, but enough to sting. A weakness I could exploit. Emily, blissfully unaware, kept her routine. She'd leave for her club twice a week, returning with flushed cheeks and vague stories. I stopped asking details, just nodded, letting her think I'd lost interest. One night, she came home late, her hair damp from a supposed rain shower. I smelled cologne on her scarf, sandalwood, not mine. I said nothing, but the next day, I installed a tracking app on her phone. She'd never notice. She barely understood tech. The app confirmed what I knew. Her club was a lie. She'd been at Marcus's loft. I stared at the blinking dot on my screen, my jaw tight, and added it to my growing file. Dates, times, lies. The revenge was taking shape. I wouldn't just expose them, that was too simple. I'd ruin them, strip away everything they valued. For Marcus, it'd be his reputation, his livelihood. For Emily, her perfect little life, her garden, her friends, her illusion of control. I'd wait, gather more, strike when they least expected it. The thought kept me sane through the charade. A month in, I made my first move. Marcus's gambling was my entry point. I created a fake profile on his poker site, anonymous, untraceable, and lured him into a game. He was cocky, betting big, oblivious to the trap. I'd played poker in college, enough to hold my own, but this wasn't about winning. I let him think he had the upper hand, then flipped it, cleaned him out for $5,000 in one night. He messaged me after, furious, demanding a rematch. I ghosted him. The next day, his ex-posts were sullen, hinting at a rough patch. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Emily noticed my mood shift. You seem happier, she said over dinner, her fork pausing midair. Work going better? I nodded, spinning a tale about a promotion I didn't have. She bought it, relieved, and went back to her meal. I watched her chew, wondering how she'd taste betrayal when it came for her. That night, she left for Sarah's, and the tracker showed her at Marcus's again. I didn't follow. Instead, I rifled through her things, found a burner phone tucked in her gardening bag, locked with a code. I cracked it by morning, her birthday. Inside, more messages, photos, plans. They were talking about a weekend away, some cabin upstate. My cabin, the one we'd bought for our 10th anniversary. The gall of it lit a fire in me. I shifted focus to Marcus's clients. Posing as a concerned friend, I emailed his gym with vague complaints, unprofessional behavior, missed sessions. Nothing provable, just enough to plant doubt. Within days, his ex-mentions spiked with grumbles from clients canceling. Small cuts, but they'd bleed him dry eventually. Emily, I'd save for later. She'd feel it most when she had nothing left to cling to. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the cabin's deed on my desk, and started plotting the next phase. They'd regret that weekend. The cabin revelation hit me harder than anything else. It wasn't just a place. It was ours. A sanctuary we'd carved out together. I remembered the summer we bought it, how Emily had danced barefoot on the porch, giddy about our future. Now she was planning to take Marcus there, to taint it with their secret. The burner phone's messages laid it out. Next weekend, a romantic getaway. She told me she was visiting her sister upstate. A lie so smooth I'd nodded without question. My hands shook as I read their plans. Wine, a fire, a night under the stars. My stars. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I drove to the cabin that night, 3 hours through winding roads, the darkness swallowing my headlights. It was untouched when I arrived. Pine walls, creaky floors, the quilt she'd sewn still on the bed. I stood there, imagining them tangled in it, and felt a rage so pure it steadied me. I wasn't going to let them have this. I installed a small camera in the living room, hidden in a bookshelf, synced to my phone. Motion activated, discreet. If they came, I'd have proof, undeniable, humiliating proof. I left before dawn, the cold air biting my skin, my mind racing with possibilities. Back home, Emily was oblivious. She hummed through her morning routine, packing a suitcase with clothes I'd washed for her. "Tell your sister hi," I said, sipping coffee, my voice steady. She smiled, kissed my forehead, and promised to call. The tracker confirmed her route, straight to the cabin. I waited, pretending to work, my laptop open to the camera feed. Hours later, it triggered. There they were, Emily and Marcus, laughing as they stumbled through the door, his arm around her waist. She poured wine, he built a fire. They toasted, clinking glasses, her head resting on his shoulder. I watched, numb, as they moved closer, their shadows flickering on the walls. The feed cut when they left the room, but I didn't need more. I had enough. I saved the footage, every frame a dagger. Marcus's gambling losses were piling up. I checked his poker account again, saw him scrambling to recoup. The gym complaints were spreading too. His client list was shrinking. But this was personal. I'd make them pay for defiling my refuge. The weekends stretched on, Emily texting me cheerful updates about her sister. I replied with forced warmth, plotting. By Sunday, when she returned, flushed and radiant, I greeted her with a hug, hiding the storm inside me. Marcus was fraying, I could see it online. His ex-posts grew erratic, complaining about haters and bad luck. I'd escalated the poker games, draining another $3,000 over 2 nights, leaving him desperate. His gym took a bigger hit when I anonymously tipped off a local journalist about unhygienic conditions. A lie? But it sparked an inspection. Violations piled up. Expired licenses, faulty equipment. Clients bailed faster. I watched his world shrink, savoring every crack, but it wasn't enough. Emily was still untouched, still gliding through her double life. I turned to her friends next. Sarah, her supposed alibi, was the weak link. I'd always liked Sarah. Blunt, loyal, no nonsense. If she knew, she'd be furious. If she didn't, she'd feel betrayed. I invited her over under the guise of planning Emily's birthday. We sat in the kitchen, coffee steaming between us. "She's been distant lately," I said, casual fishing. Sarah frowned. "Really? She seemed fine to me. Busy with the club, though." I nodded, then dropped it. "She's been at Sarah's a lot, huh?" Her eyes narrowed. "What? No. I barely see her outside lunch dates." The seed was planted. I thanked her, let her leave knowing she'd dig. Emily came home late that night, her excuse a flat tire. I didn't push, just watched her fidget, her lies thinning. The tracker showed she'd been at Marcus's again. Sarah called me the next day, voice tight. "We need to talk. She's lying about me." I feigned shock, let her vent. She'd confronted Emily, gotten vague excuses, and now doubted everything. "I'm done covering for her," Sarah said. Perfect. Emily's circle was cracking, her alibis crumbling. I thanked Sarah, promising to figure it out, and hung up satisfied. The footage from the cabin looped in my mind, my next weapon. That night, I sent Marcus another note, this time to his gym locker. "I know about the cabin." No signature, just the sketch of his tattoo. He'd find it soon, and the paranoia would deepen. I leaned back, imagining his panic, and felt the first real thrill of control. Emily sensed the shift. She was quieter, her smiles forced, her eyes darting when her phone buzzed. Sarah's confrontation had rattled her. I overheard her on a call, voice low, promising to fix it. She didn't know I'd lit the fuse. Marcus was worse off. His ex-account went dark after the locker note, but I found him on the poker site, betting recklessly, losing more. The gym shut down midweek. Health code violations. Unpaid rent. I'd nudged the landlord with an anonymous tip about his debts. Checkmate. I kept up the charade at home, cooking dinner, asking about her day. She'd ramble about the garden, but her hands trembled, her excuses flimsy. Late club meeting, she said Thursday, grabbing her keys. The tracker showed Marcus's loft again. I didn't watch her go. Instead, I uploaded the cabin footage to a private server, editing it down, her laugh, his touch, their toast. I wasn't sure how I'd use it yet, but it felt like holding dynamite. Friday, she came home pale, eyes red. Rough day? I asked, stirring soup. She nodded, avoiding me, and went to bed early. I checked her burner. Texts to Marcus. Frantic. Sarah knows something. We need to stop. Stop? Too late. I texted Marcus from the burner I'd used before. She's done with you. Check her phone. A lie, but it'd sow doubt. He'd spiral, confront her, and they'd turn on each other. Saturday, I saw the fallout. Emily left early, claiming a nursery run for plants. The tracker showed Marcus's place. Hours later, she returned, slamming the door, her face streaked with tears. You okay? I asked, feigning concern. Just a fight with Sarah, she muttered, disappearing upstairs. I smiled into my coffee. They were cracking, and I hadn't even shown my hand. That night, I mailed a USB drive to Marcus's loft, unmarked, containing the cabin clip. No note, just the video. He'd watch it, know someone else had seen, and lose what little grip he had left. I slept soundly for the first time in months, dreaming of their ruin. Marcus got the USB Monday. I knew because his poker account went silent, his bets stopped cold. I pictured him pacing that loft, replaying the footage, wondering who'd caught them. Emily was a mess too. Distracted, jumping at every noise. She barely ate, her excuses drying up. Headache, she said Tuesday, retreating to bed. The tracker showed no more visits to Marcus. They were unraveling, their tether fraying. I kept pushing. I called Sarah again, playing the worried husband. She's not herself. Did something happen? Sarah sighed, guilt lacing her voice. We fought. She admitted lying about me but wouldn't say why. I'm sorry, I should have noticed. I thanked her, planting more doubt. She'd spread it. Emily's friends would whisper, her perfect image would chip. Wednesday, I sent Marcus another text. She's lying to you too. He didn't reply, but I didn't need him to. The seed was there. Thursday, Emily cracked. She came downstairs, eyes hollow, and sat across from me. We need to talk, she said, voice trembling. My pulse quickened, but I stayed calm. What's wrong? She fidgeted, then blurted. I've been stressed. Work. Friends. Everything's falling apart. No mention of Marcus. I nodded, sympathetic, letting her dig deeper. Maybe a break would help, I suggested, watching her squirm. She agreed too fast, and I knew she'd run to him. She didn't. The tracker showed her at a hotel alone, pacing in circles on the map. Marcus had cut her off. I'd bet on it. Friday, I checked his ex. A single post. Trust no one. He'd watched the video, felt the walls closing in. I mailed copies to his ex-wife and his old clients, labeled Marcus Unplugged. Let them see his shame. Emily came home Saturday, broken, begging for a fresh start. I hugged her, promising we'd try, and felt the knife twist in my hands. She'd feel it soon. Emily clung to me that weekend, desperate to rebuild what she didn't know was ash. She cooked my favorite meal, talked about the future, our future, like nothing had changed. I played along, nodding, smiling, while the USB drives spread like wildfire. Marcus's ex-wife posted online, furious, calling him a snake. Clients chimed in, disgusted. His name was mud by Sunday, his phone off, his loft dark when I drove by. He was a ghost and I'd banished him. She noticed the silence too. Have you heard from Sarah? She asked, voice small. I shrugged. She's been busy. Emily nodded, but her eyes flickered. Fear. Maybe guilt. Sarah had rallied the others. I'd fed her just enough to turn them. The garden club canceled her membership Monday, citing personal issues. Emily stared at the email, stunned, then cried in my arms. "I don't understand," she whispered. I stroked her hair, murmuring comfort, and felt nothing. Tuesday, I leaked the cabin footage online. Anonymous, untraceable, tagged with Marcus's name. It went viral locally within hours. Cheating trainer caught on cam. His face was clear, hers blurred. I'd spared her that, for now. Calls flooded our house. Friends, neighbors, shocked. Emily answered one, went pale, and hung up. "What's wrong?" I asked, innocent. She stammered. "Some video. I don't know." She fled upstairs, locked the door. I let her stew, knowing she'd piece it together. Wednesday, she confronted me, wild-eyed. "Did you see it? That video?" I nodded, solemn. "Yeah. Looks bad for whoever's involved." Her breath hitched. She knew I knew, but not how deep. I left for work, giving her space to drown in it. Marcus was gone. Neighbors said he'd packed and fled. Emily was next. I'd saved the cruelest cut for her, and it was coming. Emily broke Thursday night. I came home to find her on the couch, face buried in her hands, the room heavy with silence. Her phone lay shattered on the floor, screen cracked, a casualty of her unraveling. I set my keys down, slow, deliberate, and sat across from her. "What happened?" I asked, voice steady, though my pulse thrummed. She looked up, eyes red, swollen. A stranger wearing my wife's skin. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, voice raw. I've been lying to you." The admission hung there, fragile, begging me to shatter it. I didn't. I leaned back, crossed my arms, and waited. She stumbled through it. "Marcus, 8 months. A mistake that grew into something she couldn't stop." She didn't mention the cabin, the video, just kept it vague, tears streaking her cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed, reaching for my hand. I let her take it, her fingers cold against mine, and nodded. "Why?" I asked, calm, like we were discussing the weather. She faltered, mumbled about loneliness, excitement, him being different. Every word fueled me, but I stayed still, a statue of patience. "I ended it," she said, desperate now. "When Sarah found out, I panicked. He's gone. I swear." Lies or half-truths. Marcus hadn't left by her choice. I'd driven him out. I squeezed her hand, gentle, and said, "Okay, we'll figure it out." Her relief was instant, a shuddering breath, a weak smile. She thought it was over, that I'd forgive, rebuild. I stood, kissed her forehead, and went to bed, leaving her crumpled on the couch. Forgiveness wasn't in me. Only retribution, cold and sharp, waiting to strike. Friday, I checked the fallout. Marcus's name was poison online. His ex-wife's posts had spread. The video a local scandal. Emily's friends were icing her out. Sarah had rallied them, her betrayal a rallying cry. The garden club's rejection was just the start. Her world was shrinking, and she didn't even know I'd lit the match. I spent the day finalizing my plan, every detail locked in place. She'd confessed, but it wasn't enough. She'd feel the weight of her choices, and it'd crush her. Saturday, I turned the screw. Emily woke fragile, clinging to normalcy, making coffee like it could stitch us back together. I sipped mine, watching her tremble, then said, "People are talking about that video." Her mug slipped, splashing across the counter. "What do you mean?" she asked, voice high, panicked. I shrugged. "It's everywhere. Marcus and some woman. Sounds messy." Her face drained of color, eyes darting. I haven't seen it," she lied, scrubbing the spill with shaking hands. I let it drop, but the seed was planted. She'd check, and the blurred face wouldn't save her from suspicion. By noon, the whispers hit her. A neighbor called, voice dripping with pity. "Is it true? That video?" Emily stammered denials, hung up, and fled to the bedroom. I followed later, found her scrolling X, the footage looped on muted screens, her silhouette unmistakable to anyone who knew her. Comments piled up. "Who's the mystery girl? Poor husband." She didn't know I'd leaked it, but the shame was eating her alive. She turned to me, wild-eyed. "They think it's me," she whispered. I frowned, feigning confusion. "Why would they? You said it's over." She nodded, too fast, and I left her to drown in it. Sunday, the storm broke. Sarah texted her. A screenshot of the video, a single line, "You're disgusting." Emily sobbed, begged me to drive her to Sarah's, to explain. I refused, citing work, and watched her leave alone, mascara streaking. She returned hours later, defeated. Sarah had cut her off the friend group too. Her garden, her refuge, was all she had left, and I'd saved it for last. That night, she clung to me, promising change. I held her, silent, plotting the final blows. Monday, I struck at her core. Emily's garden was her pride. Roses, hydrangeas, a sanctuary she'd nurtured for years. She'd spent the weekend there, digging, pruning, hiding from the world. I'd watched, waited, then acted. Overnight, I'd hired a crew, quiet, discreet, paid in cash. They arrived at dawn before she woke and tore it apart. Every petal, every root, ripped out, replaced with barren soil and gravel. A landscaping error, I'd claim, but the message would be clear. I stood by the window, coffee in hand. As they finished, the yard transformed into a wasteland. She woke late, shuffled downstairs, and froze at the sight. A scream ripped from her, raw, animalistic. She ran outside, barefoot, clawing at the gravel, sobbing for her flowers. I followed, slow, concerned. "What happened?" I asked, voice soft. She turned, hysteria in her eyes. "It's gone. Everything's gone." I frowned, called the company, feigned outrage at their mistake. She bought it, too broken to question, and collapsed in the dirt, mourning. I knelt beside her, murmuring comfort, my triumph buried deep. The garden's loss gutted her. She barely ate, barely spoke, wandering the house like a ghost. Her phone stayed silent, no friends, no Marcus, just me. I cooked, cleaned, played the doting husband, watching her shrink. Tuesday, she found a single rose petal under the couch, a remnant I'd left, and wept for hours. I'd taken her joy, her identity, and she didn't suspect me. The video's fallout kept spreading. Co-workers shunned her, neighbors stared. She quit her job Wednesday, citing stress. And I nodded, supportive, tightening the noose. Thursday, I showed my hand. Emily was a shell, pale, quiet, clinging to scraps of routine. I dismantled her life. Marcus gone, friends lost, garden destroyed, reputation in tatters. But she still thought I was her anchor. That ended now. I waited until dinner, set the table with her favorite dishes, poured wine. She sat wary, picking at her food. "We need to talk," I said, calm, setting my fork down. Her eyes flickered, fear, recognition. "I know everything," I began, voice low. "Marcus, the cabin, 8 months of lies." She froze, fork clattering, her breath hitching. "I saw the video unblurred. I found your phone, the photos, the texts." I slid a USB across the table, the original footage, her face clear. She stared, trembling, mouth opening to deny. I cut her off. "Don't. I've known for months. I watched you fall apart, and I made it happen." Her eyes widened, confusion turning to horror as I listed it. Marcus's ruin, Sarah's betrayal, the garden crew. "You did this?" she whispered, voice breaking. I nodded, leaning back. "You betrayed me. I returned the favor." She sobbed, begged, promises spilling out, therapy, honesty, anything. I stood, unmoved. "You don't get it back. Not me, not this life." I'd sold the house that morning. Papers signed, movers booked. "We're done," I said, dropping the deed beside the USB. She lunged for me, pleading, but I walked out, her cries echoing behind me. I didn't look back. Friday, I left. The movers came at dawn, packing my things while Emily watched, hollow-eyed, from the porch. I'd rented a place downtown. Small, stark, a fresh start. The house sold fast. Buyers didn't care about scandals, just square footage. Emily got half legally, but it wouldn't save her. Marcus was a rumor now. Fled town, broke, disgraced. I checked. He'd vanished. No trace online. My revenge was complete, precise, a structure I'd built and demolished. She called once, Saturday, voice cracked, begging to talk. I hung up, blocked her. Friends asked. Shocked, curious, but I kept it simple. She cheated. It's over. They didn't push. Months later, I heard she'd moved. Some apartment. No garden, no life. I didn't care. I rebuilt mine. New projects, new routines, alone but steady. The cabin stayed mine. I burned the quilt, scrubbed their ghosts away, and kept it as a trophy. Revenge wasn't joy, but it was peace. I'd torn them down and I stood taller for it.